Breaking news from Carol Rosenberg of the New York Times regarding one of the 9/11 defendants, Ammar al-Baluchi, the nephew of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind of the 9/11 attacks. And let's get right to the article. It's on spokesman.com, but I'll post it here because you'll meet a paywall in New York Times. But this is an article written by Carol Rosenberg, one of the very best in the country, reporting out of Guantanamo. I consider her the best in terms of reporting out of Guantanamo. And as you can see here, military judge throws out September 11th case confession as obtained through torture. Now, a little bit of history. Ammar Baluchi was not part of a previous deal made by the lawyers for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Mustafa al-Hassawi, and Tawfiq bin Attash, also known as Kalam. Ramzi bin al-Shib was one of the five, but he was declared mentally unfit for trial by the same judge, Robert McCall, and he is no longer fit to stand trial for the attacks of September 11th. Ammar Baluchi was not part of that deal. His law firm, and in fact, I interviewed one of his lawyers, Alka Pradham, about the case. So it's on the Darkened Hour podcast. So his confession regarding 9/11 has been thrown out because it was obtained through torture. Now, what does this mean with the other three, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Tawfiq bin Attash, and Mustafa al-Hassawi? But they've already entered into plea deals. Now, this was, of course, again, that was a mess because there was an original plea deal where they would confess to everything under the sun regarding 9/11, full confession, for getting the death penalty to the table. The Department of Defense under Lloyd Austin, under the previous president, Joe Biden, refused the plea deals. And then that order was reversed by McCall, but it's still in the air. Hasn't been a definitive judgment yet. But this is huge. I mean, this is right off the bat, because if they can just get out of this deal, then what's holding these three guys back from having their cases dismissed? Now, I remember I did a video way years back about the horror of a scenario that was least likely, that all five of the defendants would get off of every charge regarding 9/11 because all their confessions were obtained through torture. And this is the reason why the trial never started, because their lawyers were salivating at the time, saying, yeah, let's go. And then in 2011, there was a report that the FBI interviewed all these people, and they got their full confessions then, but still, they're conditioned. I mean, like I said before, even if they're guilty, even if they planned it, how can you trust them? And I've always said that the CIA did this on purpose, so this way the public really doesn't know what to believe, what to know. You can believe whatever you want. Do you know it? This is why I'm a big stickler on, the truth of the matter. All right, let's read the article. Military judge on Friday throws out the confession of a man accused of conspiring in the September 11 attacks made to federal agents in 2007. I said 2011. I was wrong. 2007 in Guantánamo Bay, ruling the statements were the product of a campaign of torture isolated carried out by the CIA. The CIA didn't share information on Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi to the United States government, nor, and also, they renditioned and captured these people and tortured them right away. There was a cable, and this was brought up by the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence regarding the CIA's rendition and torture program, where the final report stated that they looked at classified information, the senators and this committee, led by Dianne Feinstein, that the CIA had already implemented its torture program before Khalid Sheikh Mohammed even got to Camp, I think it was Dark Green or Camp Green or something like that. They were going to torture him anyway, regardless of if he was going to be helpful. The ruling by Colonel Matthew McCall was the latest setback to prosecutors in their long-running quest to bring the death penalty case to trial despite the years of the 5 defendants had spent in secret CIA prisons. Ammar al-Baluchi was so thoroughly psychologically conditioned to abuse and threats during his time at the agency's overseas prisons or black sites from between the years 2003 to 2006 that he involuntarily incriminated himself in 2007, the judge wrote in his 111-page decision. And why this is really huge, because remember I said the FBI interviewed these people and that they all incriminated themselves. What's stopping them now from having all their cases thrown out? Now, imagine this. No one's charged with 9/11. This is the only case where we have a case at all, even if it's not much of a case, regarding the defendants charged with 9/11. If somehow the worst comes to light, these guys aren't charged, they're probably going to get deported and go overseas and probably go to Saudi Arabia or the Gulf, United Arab Emirates or whatever, to serve out their sentences there forever. Or they stay at Guantánamo languishing just like Abu Zubaydah, who's not charged with anything. That's what they'll probably do to these guys. Call them indefinite detention, where they're not charged with anything, but they're too dangerous to be released. How is that lawful? Baluchi was in charge of the case. He also goes by the name of Ali Abdulaziz Ali. He's accused of sending money and providing other support to some of the hijackers who carried out the attacks on September 11th. He is the nephew of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the man accused of masterminding the attack. Mohammed and 2 other defendants in the case, Mustafa Al-Sawi, Tawfiq bin Atash, reached plea agreements with prosecutors now being contested in federal court. The 5th defendant, Ramzi bin Al-Shib, was found mentally unfit to stand trial, a condition his lawyer blames on the torture in the hands of the CIA. So it could go either way. These guys could be found mentally unfit. What's the difference between Ramzi bin Al-Shib and Mustafa Al-Sawi? If you read some of the torture reports regarding, say, Mustafa Al-Sawi, they raped him with like a Brillo pad. He can't sit down ever. I mean, he has to have a pillow. The CIA just testimony derived from CIA documents showed that Baluchi was routinely kept naked and beaten during his first days of agency, customary in a program of enhanced interrogation, which was designed by 2 psychologists on contract to CIA, and it's Dr. Bruce Jessen and Dr. James Mitchell, who authorized the program, which was called SEER. I think it's called Survival, Evasion, Resistance, Escape, something like that. Where, American soldiers, if they were ever captured by, the Viet Cong or by Russians, that they would survive torture methods that they think, that they were going to be used. Well, now it's the reverse. We're going to use these methods on enemy combatants, thanks to the White House legal counsel, who doesn't provide the Geneva Conventions to these people, right? No rules, no laws. They're not U.S. citizens, so they can be tortured. Student interrogators took turns slamming their heads against a wall. He was deprived of sleep for 82 hours straight by shackling him at the ankles and wrists in a way that forced him to stand naked and with a hood on his head. He was made to fear he was being drowned in a mock waterboarding technique in which he was laid on a tarp as cold water was being poured on a towel covering his face. What did the CIA? Did the CIA actually think that this was going to work? Right? They think that this was going to work. But we'll get the truth out of them. Years ago. No, I'm sorry. You know what? Yeah, it was years before that. It was right before that. The CIA heard that Ibn Sheikh al-Libi, who was a trainer at the Al-Farouk training camp, Chaldean training camp in Afghanistan, that the Egyptians had tortured him to get a confession that Iraq was procuring chemical weapons with Al-Qaeda. And he said, yes. We went to war with Iraq regarding this. And when the CIA found out he lied, they asked him, why'd you lie? He goes, I told you anything you want, just to stop the torture. You would think, maybe we shouldn't torture these guys. Maybe we should use the FBI method, like Ali Soufan with Abu Zubaydah. Talk with them. Maybe you'll get something out of them. That they didn't have to torture Ramzi Youssef. They told him whatever they wanted to hear. And he told them the truth. Just as the CIA psychologist had planned, Mr. Ali learned that he was helpless to resist the torture and that cooperation meant the lessening of the abuse and an increase in rewards. McCall wrote, that's the judge. The goal of the program was to condition him through torture and other inhumane and coercive methods to become compliant during any government questioning. Program worked, I would say. The CNN wrote an article about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's confessions, and it was like 71, terrorist operations. When I first read that many years ago, I was like, this guy is, they weren't torturing him to get information. They were torturing him to say shit. Whatever you want, I'm guilty. That's why they waterboarded him 183 times in a single fucking month. 183 times. That's not getting information out of him. That's you telling him, tell us what we want to hear, which is anything. Because you don't got fucking evidence. Probably. What's funny is that you do. And the CIA has a videotape confession of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi bin Ashif. Yosri Fudos, a journalist at Al Jazeera, was invited by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to an Al Qaeda safe house in Pakistan. I think it's Jalalabad or Islamabad, where they go through channels and being blindfolded. And he was in a house and he met with Ramzi bin Ashif and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. They told him, we planned 9/11. We showed you. They showed you why. And I was told by someone from the NSA that I don't want to say his name, but that the video stills were used in the 9/11 Commission, but in I think closed door. It's not public. Why isn't this in trial? This is it, the slam dunk case. Why do you need to torture him? Or did they find out they had the videotape after they tortured him? Now we can't use it. The decision was not released in its entirety, pending a review for classified information, but lawyers with access to the document provided unclassified passages. The question of whether the interrogations could be used as trial had been a central focus for the case for 7 years, taking up thousands of pages of pretrial pleadings and dozens of days of witness testimony. In the last year, I did a couple of videos when they were coming out, when they interviewed, they put on the stand James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen about their methods. Prosecutors had argued at the time of the interrogations in January 2007, his fourth month at Guantánamo Bay, Baluchi was no longer fearful of his captors and willing to participate in 3 days questioning, but he's still there. And they probably told him, if you lie, say that you're not part of the 9/11 operation, we're just going to torture anyway. Judge noted that the argument might have been more sound had the agents read to him from a traditional script of his right to not incriminate himself, but they did not. Before 9/11, the FBI were the unsung heroes. They tried. After 9/11, they helped to cover up Saudi complicity with the CIA regarding 9/11 through, forced pressure from the State Department. Alka Pradhan, who I've interviewed, she's great. Human Rights Counsel for Baluchi welcomed the ruling, saying it was recognized the brutal torture he suffered at American hands. I may want to speak with her, do a video with her about this latest breakthrough. There's also a reminder to the United States that governments that commit crimes must be held accountable, Pradhan continued. Yes, we spoke about this too. The American people, constitutional values, and the rule of law have all paid a heavy price in over 2 decades of impunity for the torture program. She's a knockout human rights advocate, Alka Pradhan. Unsung hero. Never, not internationally recognized or even recognized here in the States. And she's a great legal counsel. No recordings or transcripts were made of Baluchi's Guantanamo interrogations. Instead, the agents described his answers to demeanor in a 45-page memo, which the judge ruled Friday would be inadmissible at trial. Good. Rear Admiral Aaron Hugh, the chief prosecutor for Guantanamo cases, said Saturday that his office was reviewing the ruling and will make a decision on whether to appeal in the near future. He'll probably not because it's fruitless. The special Guantanamo court was intended to grapple with the impact of earlier violent CIA interrogations. But McCall who was soon to retire from the Air Force. By the way, I think it's 4 judges. From the time that this hearing started in 2006, now 19 years, we've had 4 judges. I think one just excused himself, the other did they retire. Oh, but McCall, who was soon to retire from the Air Force, became the second military judge to suppress the confessions of a capital defendant as involuntary. In 2023, an Army Judge Colonel Lanny Acosta Jr. threw out the confessions of a Saudi defendant who was charged with the bombing of the USS Cole, Guantanamo's longest-running capital case. He ruled that any resistance the accused might have inclined to put up one acts to incriminate himself was intentionally, literally beaten out of him years before. I think that's al-Nashiri. Prosecutors subsequently appealed that decision, lost. The defendant in that case is Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri, who's slated to go to trial on October 6th, 25 years after Al-Qaeda bombed the USS Cole in the port of Aden, which killed 17 American sailors. That's the end of the article. I'm going to provide it in the description. Huge breakthrough news right there. I mean, this is really big because this now sets the precedent. If, for some reason, that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Tawfiq bin Attash, and Mustafa Hassawi can get the plea deals off the table, they can legally probably walk away from not being charged with 9/11, which would mean that Ramzi bin al-Shib, who's declared mentally unfit for trial, Ammar al-Baluchi, whose confessions are thrown out of trial, and now it hangs into the other 3, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Mustafa Hassawi, and Tawfiq bin Attash. The government, under the Trump administration, who has no type of concern for this hearing, at least with Biden, there was some attention paid. Trump doesn't give a shit. Just imagine what this would look like in the public sphere. It would be, if I was one of the family members, I'm on really thin ice with my nails in the ground. Because if for some reason the Department of Defense wins their case, like they're refusing of the if the defendants basically win and they get the plea deal off, and these guys could just basically get off the other 3 without a charge, that means nobody's charged with 9/11. A horror show. So I'm pretty sure the victims' families are pressuring. If I'm like, Elizabeth Miller at the Peaceful Tomorrows, 9/11 for Peaceful Tomorrows, if I'm Motley Rice, or if I'm Creedler and Creedler, or the other law firms representing other family members, I'm almost begging for that plea deal to go through, because if not, nobody's charged with 9/11. And remember I said I gave you a little bit of concern, like if they all took the plea deals, we'll never know what the government had or didn't have until many years later when the documents are declassified after like 30 years. In this case, if they get off because the confessions are coerced, well, that means the government doesn't have a case and he could classify the material anyway. Like, Jesus Christ, what a fucking mess. All right, listen, thank you guys for tuning in, and see you next video. Take care, everybody.